And with the North collection, although all the stylization keys are there to show that it's a Moon product, it's the biggest and most radical change that they've actually made in their 43-year history.
Okay.
Because they have redesigned everything within the units. Everything from the amplification type. So they're still using analog amplification. Many manufacturers made the decision to move over to digital amplification. Moon have stayed with analog amplification. But what they've been gradually working towards over the years, they have a policy of reducing a thing called feedback. And feedback, give or take, exists in most standard amplifiers. And it's a compensation circuit. It compensates for the difference between outgoing signal to a loudspeaker and return signal from a loudspeaker, in the broadest terms. Moon had moved to what was known as localized feedback. So they weren't actually using global feedback through the whole amplifier circuit. They were using localized feedback at the output stage. But their main goal and their main wish for their overall design of their amplifiers was to completely eliminate feedback. Now, the problem with that is that if you eliminate feedback, the amplifier looks at outgoing signal and return signal using feedback. If you stop comparing the two of those, then you have an amplifier that starts producing lots of distortion. And that distortion and the noise associated with it will increase as you increase the power and the complexity of the output of the audio signal. So what they pushed for this time round was to replace the circuit with a thing called an audio comparator. And the audio comparator forms part of the new amplification circuit. And the new amplification circuit is called Moon Distortion Cancelling Amplification, MDCA. So to give it, they, as you know, they like their little acronyms on this. So the MDCA effectively sits out with the signal path, which is first of all a good thing to do. Because you're not. It's quite unusual because what you're not doing is you're not getting in the way of the active signal path. And it doesn't do anything in the middle of the amplifier. And when I say in the middle of the amplifier, amplifiers broadly have three stages: input stage, gain stage, and output stage. So normally feedback kind of connects to all of these. What Moon have done here, and the design team have done, is with their audio comparator, which is an analog circuit incidentally, so just make this clear, it's not DSP, it's not digital signal processing, which is an approach that other people have taken in the past and still use extensively. They are looking at the input signal and the output signal, comparing the two of them and creating a compensation signal, which is then injected into the signal. So it's effectively the total opposite of what is regarded as the problems, the distortion and the noise. Hence, noise cancelling amplification. So any noise, any distortion that's there is effectively mirrored, re-injected, and cancels out. Now, the big question is, how does that manifest itself in what you hear? What doesn't happen is you don't suddenly listen to it and go, wow, that's really quiet. I don't hear any noise. I don't hear any distortion. Why don't you do that? Because anyone who's heard a previous incarnation of a Moon amplifier, one of the things that they would have commonly said about it was it's very low noise. There's a very low background noise. It's quite dark, it's quite inky. So they would already have said all of these things. So you're not moving from noisy to no noise. You're actually moving from incredibly low, what we call noise floor, to an even lower level of noise floor. So how does that manifest itself in what you hear? What it does is it actually relaxes the whole presentation down. And what happens to the customer, what happens to the music listener, is that they become drawn more into the music. So that's how it manifests itself. And sure, anyone hearing a Moon Electronics setup and listening to a full Moon system with a appropriate grade pair of loudspeakers and good quality source music will listen to it and go, wow, that's eerily dark. That's very quiet. The other thing that happens is that music involvement for most people comes at a particular volume level. And that volume level tends to vary from person to person, from music choice to music choice, from mood to mood. And it may be that one person needs to really pump up the level to get their engagement with their music taste and their listening style. What we're finding, and what was a target on here, was to get that click of musical engagement even at very, very low volume levels. So you can drop down of an evening, you've had a hard day at work, you settle back in your sofa, you put on some music, the family's gone to bed or whatever, and you find yourself drawn into the music. The musical performance is always there. You're always connecting with it, and you can do that at low volume levels. And that's a really nice thing, and it's a very, very, very big achievement for the guys at Simaudio, and they're very proud of it. Which kind of takes me on to, you know, what you get as you go up through the range. So for some people, it's the stylization of the product in the way of how you interact with it. For other people, it's purely the audio performance. And then for others, it's the appropriateness of both how it fits into their current system and how it fits into their price budget. And people often buy high-end hi-fi systems in stages. So the structure of your average hi-fi system, if we compare it to what Moon were doing, and indeed just the industry was doing 20, 25 years ago, has changed beyond all recognition. So, you know, taking products like the 700 series and the 800 series, so this is an 891, what we actually have done here is presented a product that is much more about how people live their life, how people use their hi-fi system, and how people choose and select their music. So you probably remember that I said a few minutes ago that the 600 level product as a system was probably the most conventional layout. An integrated amplifier and a source component. When we go to the 791, which is the streaming preamplifier, and here the 891, which is also a streaming preamplifier, we have a product that is quite universal in its function. So as well as this being a music streamer, it's also a multiple input digital to analog converter. You can plug multiple sources into it, including things like HDMI from the audio return channel from your smart TV, or for people who are maybe still using hard disk Blu-ray for playback of high performance music video. That can be plugged into it. You've got a plethora of other digital inputs, including USB host for playing off of your friend brings you some music round on a portable drive. You can plug it in, interrogate that. It's got network connection, so you can pull stuff off of the web. You can pull things off of your home network. But it also has a number of analog inputs because some people still have a CD player and they'll want to plug that in. And it also has a fully integrated and fully configurable phono stage, because at the same time as we've made all these changes about where we source our music from, we've stopped going to the cabinet to pick a CD to put it in the CD player. And we've replaced that by going to the cabinet to pick a piece of vinyl to put it on the turntable.
Yeah.
So that's come back full fold. So these are truly up-to-date modern units looking at how people are listening to things. So people do want to play records, vinyl records. People do want to stream music. People do want to put content from their TVs or other disc players through their main hi-fi system. So these are great capture units for that. Now, historically, that would have been an absolute no-no in terms of high-performance audio, because people would have said, no, you need a dedicated box for this, you need a dedicated box for that, etc., etc. But, you know, if you take the average preamplifier layout before, physically and mechanically, it would have been this size. So actually you did need quite a big box to put it in, to get it to work properly, to lay it out properly, to choose all the correct components. Everything's got smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller, which means that you can actually do all of these things in an interconnected layout within one modular structured box. So although this is one external box, internally it's a multiple box layout. Okay. So we have a power supply that sits within its own casework. We have a pure digital section. There is in no way connected to anything analog. And in fact, in this 891, you have 100% galvanic isolation between all things digital and all things analog. So in the essence of, you know, and you have this here with the 791, the smaller model to this, and this 891, you have the situation where a consumer has a turntable, they plug their turntable in, they go to the menu system on the front panel here, and using the nice display here, they configure it to match exactly the cartridge that they've got. Not a simple moving magnet, moving coil. There is a basic setting for people who don't want to configure, but you can go down, choose the capacitive loading, the impedance setting, the gain settings, choose between RIA curve and IEC curve. You know, it's highly configurable. Once they've done all of that in a very high-end way, they sit down and they play their vinyl. So all that preamplification and equalization is done internally without compromise. The analog signal then goes to a 100% pure analog preamplifier. It never enters the digital domain. It's never controlled by the digital domain. It's never even supplied power by a digital or a switch mode power supply. Although externally, this unit is actually using a switch mode power supply looking to the outside world. Internally, it's creating its own analog rails. Okay. So they call it moon hybrid power, MHP. Yeah. So using the very best of both technologies, the analog circuitry and the digital circuitry. But internally, the analog boards see very, very nicely regulated linear power supply rails. Which means that when you then take the signal out to go to either your moon power amplifier or to your active loudspeakers, that analog signal has 100% remained in the analog domain all the time. Okay. This looks like a digital volume control. It's not. It's a numeric feedback. And in fact, you know, for volume controls, it's probably an area where the guys at the design team, Simaudio, for the Moon products, are probably best described as being obsessive. Because we have 3 products in this range that have volume controls in them. 4 if you include the Music Streamer 681 set to be digital preamp mode, which I'll come back to a little bit more detail later on. What they've actually done is they've designed a volume control circuit specifically and totally different for every product. Okay. not every manufacturer, but most manufacturers will choose their volume control system and they'll apply that to the range of product. They'll maybe have 2 volume control systems, one for their lower end products, cost restrained, and then one not cost restrained for their higher end products.
Yeah.
And that's fine. But because of the obsession and the importance of the volume control element in a Moon product to the overall Moon sound, the guys looked at every product and designed a specific volume control.
Okay.
So the volume control systems, you have in the integrated amplifier, you have the MVol3 volume control system. 3 denotes the fact that it's the 3rd incarnation of this. First one came in 2005, second one came in 2011, and the 3rd one for the North Collection. In the 891 here, which is the flagship product, you have MRay2. Now MRay2, the number 2 denotes it's the 2nd incarnation of this. MRay1 existed in the reference 850 analog preamplifier, which is still a current product. But this has a more advanced volume control system than the £40,000 analog preamplifier, just to put it into context. And it's designed and used in this product only. And then you have the kind of fly in the ointment, probably the big argument point, which is in volume control. Should you control volume in the analog domain, or should you control volume in the digital domain? So to give a fast track explanation of the pros and cons of it, there are more pros of controlling it within the analog domain than there are in the digital domain. The biggest pro of controlling it in the digital domain is the actual control side of it. Becomes quite simplistic. You can set as many steps as you want. You've got full flexibility. You can send information easily back to control devices, remote controls, all of these things. If you do it in the analog domain, you have to do quite a lot of background interpolation to create the control aspect of it. But the guys are not shy of a bit of hard work on the design bench. So they've done that with all their products for years now. So you get all the benefits of a beautiful, smooth, multi-stepped volume control here, or replicated here on the beautiful handset, or up and down from the control app. That's really nice. But they've kept that for their sound quality and their sound signature purely in the analog domain. For this 681 streamer, which bear in mind is a purely digital product. All the inputs are digital. It's a digital streamer. Everything else you can plug into is digital. It doesn't have any analog to digital conversion. So everything that you source from it is digital. So there was an opportunity there to create a dedicated digital volume control for that. But it's very easy to create a fairly good digital volume control system, but they all fundamentally have the same problem, that when you can, and other manufacturers, have their own approach to this, but in general, when you reduce volume in the digital domain, you're actually throwing away signal to do that. So the workaround that most manufacturers have is to use a thing called least significant bit information for volume control. So they look at the bandwidth of digital processing. So say they're working at 24-bit, they will throw away signal that actually doesn't carry any audio soundtrack, first of all. So they're throwing away, for want of a better expression, nothings. Yes. Until you get to the point where you bring the volume down and then you start to eat into the signal. So what Moon have done is they've come up with an acronym, MHV, Moon Hybrid Volume. And as the name would suggest, it's a hybrid solution. So what they do is they utilize digital attenuation, but they utilize digital attenuation. All Moon internal digital processing is done at 32-bit. Pretty much all the signal that's coming in is up to and including 24-bit. So high-res audio will be 2496K or whatever. There's still a lot of the content is CD resolution at 16-bit or below, MP3, high bitrate MP3. But it all gets manipulated in 32-bit processing. So they utilize the 8 unused bits to do the digital attenuation. And before they encroach into any audio signal, i.e. in the other 24-bit element, they give you more analog gain or reduce the analog gain. So if you need to go down a whole lot after the digital to analog stage, they reduce the analog gain, which resets your counter to start digitally attenuating. Reduce the analog gain, resets your counter for digital attenuation, which means that you have this very pure form of digital volume control by doing it in a hybrid domain, part in analog, part in digital. So that's MHV. It only exists in the 681. Now, there's a lot of design work gone into that, but it means they now have this technology fully locked down for future projects. But things can be mixed and matched, and you know, this is a good example of mixing and matches. An 891 reference source and preamplifier with the highly capable 761 power amplifier, and these power amplifiers are also switchable into mono mode. So for people who wanted to go with the smaller casework size, smaller footprint of a smaller power amplifier, but they wanted the extra performance and the extra power, they can utilize two 761s.
Hi there, it's Alan here from Loud & Clear Glasgow. Loud & Clear is Scotland's premier hi-fi and home cinema retailer and installer. The purpose of this channel is to give you a little bit of insight into some of the behind the scenes of the hi-fi industry. We're interviewing some techs, some salespeople, and we're trying to find out some really interesting information about some of the brands we know and love. If you think this is the kind of thing that might be of interest to you, please like and subscribe.